Next guest has all the answers. Please welcome to the show, Dan Geltrude, America's accountant. Dan, thanks for being on. How far away are we from maybe a negative number from the government as far as these non-farm jobs number go?
You know, Scott, it is so hard to tell what's happening. Every time we're pointing in one direction, something else happens. So this is really tough stuff as far as the prediction business. This is what I will tell you is that there are obviously some signs of slowing, which to some extent is a good thing for the purpose of a soft landing, meaning we get inflation down without wrecking the economy. Is that possible? That's tough. These job numbers still remain strong, and as you were talking about, unemployment is still low. So the jobs market is tight. And when you have a situation like that, what does it mean? It means that wages are probably going to continue to grow because companies, employers still need people. And if wages are going to grow and the job market is tight, that makes it really, really tough to get inflation under control, right? So we end up in a situation where we have high interest rates, we're in a recession. I don't know, Scott, I got to throw up my hands here and say maybe we're just better off doing nothing.
Well, I feel your pain there because you're right. And it's not fair of me to ask those questions because there's really no right answer. But it just seems like it's going to go very slowly and all of a sudden hit us at once, right? Because it's just so hard to get a trend. And yes, are things trending in the way that the jobs market's coming under a little bit of pressure and we're getting a little bit better handle on it? Yeah, you could say that, but you're right. The numbers a lot of times are just nebulous and we're not really seeing what we'd like to see. And I just can't get through my thick skull two numbers. Number one is that we're still at 6% CPI. Now we're going to get a reading on that on Wednesday, but if your goal is 2%, even if CPI comes down to 5.5 or even 5, we're still pretty far away from getting to the government's mandate, right? And that 3.5% unemployment rate, when the government thinks it should be closer to 5.5 or 6% to really get out in front of inflation, means I still stick with my initial, remarks of I think it's going to be a long landing. I don't think it's going to be a soft or hard. I think it's just going to take a lot longer than we think. What do you think?
Well, I think so. Based upon the direction the Fed is going, which, look, they're saying they're going to keep raising interest rates until we can get down to that goal of 2% inflation. And we are a long way off being around 6% right now. So it's going to take some time to get there. And keep in mind, too, it seemed, you talk about trending, right? It seemed like this bank crisis potentially looming was going to do some of the dirty work for the Fed. But it didn't. All of a sudden, where did that go? So we thought we were going in one direction, and now all of a sudden it's gone. Is it just out of the headlines? We don't know. But if interest rates were impacting banks so negatively, the Fed may have been forced to pump the brakes. But if that's really kind of gone away and it was only a few banks having some management problems, well, what's stopping the Fed from continuing to raise interest rates? Nothing, except for the Fed.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because we're going to talk about it in the C block today with Seth Denson. I think you know who he is, because it hasn't gone away. It's just not on the headlines anymore. It's not on the front pages. That regional bank problem, and I've said this before on our market day report that we do here 5 hours a day from 8 to 1 Central. When these regional banks get in a little bit of trouble, and you know what I'm talking about, they're like turtles, right? They bring everything in, and they're not going to be lending. And the lending numbers have fallen off a cliff over the last 2 weeks. I mean, it's just been very, very. I mean, since records began, that's how dramatic these lending numbers have been. So it's going to be interesting to see how the economy shapes up if nobody can get any lending, nobody can get any borrowing. We've seen some bad numbers coming in through with multifamily housing and the likes. I think that nothing happens fast with the Fed, but I think this credit crisis, this bank problem, has been pushed to the back burner because, all I hear about is war with China, the U.S. and China and Taiwan, right? But that's going to come back to haunt them. I feel as though, and I said this today on the Market Day Report, remember that guy for Allstate, Mr. Mayhem? I feel like that's what's happening with all of our markets. I can't find anywhere to go hide. What about you?
Well, Scott, what's happening, and you're rightly pointing it out, think about how headline driven everything is, right? We're kind of alluding to the fact that the Fed can be headline driven, which is a dangerous place for them to be. And of course, the stock market is absolutely headline driven.
Right.
You know, you got all these emotions running wild. That's why, you know, I think you and I are in agreement with why not just have the Fed do nothing, at least for a little while, and let's see if the free markets could actually shake themselves out and right themselves,
right,
as opposed to forcing things to go in a direction which is clearly not working.
Right. I agree. I mean, if those folks that think that we're going to be cutting rates anytime soon, that's going to be a cataclysmic problem that they have to cut rates for. I mean, that's just not good. I don't know why you'd want to ever wish for that. But anyway, I could go on another hour with you on this, Dan. It's awesome stuff.